You know, I've driven this car for 2 days now. I haven't driven it all that much in terms of distance, but the times that I have driven it, I've never got out of it without a smile on my face. It's just got that old school hot hatch feel about it, and I must admit, I do kind of miss it. I do kind of miss of having the drama of a powerful front wheel drive car pulling you along the road, the manual gear changes, and given how good this gearbox is, just slamming it into gear and then powering on. Oh, it's such a handful. It is such a handful, but it is so fun. Good morning everybody, and welcome back to the Just the Driven YouTube channel. You join me on a rather wet and windy day here where we're going to be taking a look and a drive of the Mark IV Focus ST, which you can see behind me. Apologies for any wind noise, and to cut this short, I'll give you a quick tour of the outside, a quick tour of the inside, and then we're going to take it on the road. But let's get straight into it. So in front of me here is the Ford Focus ST Mark IV, released in 2019, in addition to their other hot hatches such as the Ford Fiesta ST. So for those of you that don't know, I've owned two Mark II Focus STs in the past, so the 2.5 5-cylinder variant, and I was a very big fan of them. And it seems like Ford have completely overhauled their hot hatch segment here with the Ford Focus ST Mark IV, implementing an eLSD, so an electronic LSD that's mechanically controlled, and a huge change to the inside, which we'll cover very shortly. But I must say, just taking a quick walk around the car, I'm very impressed by these lines. We've got the 19-inch satin grey wheels on here, which are wrapped in Michelin Pilot Sport 4S tyres. We've also got quite a swooping roofline as well, all the way to the back, with a rather aggressive rear spoiler here. My only gripe with the outside of this car is these two tailpipes. They don't particularly look too finished. It just looks like a bit of 3-inch stainless pipe. I don't know if you can see that too well there. But overall, the car is a very good looking car. Now, the Mark IV Focus ST is here to bring competition to the Hyundai i30N, which is an incredibly good car and has got very good reviews all over the internet and all over videos from what I've seen. In addition to that, this car is targeted to the Golf GTI TCR, the sort of last swan song of the Mark VII GTI. Before we take a listen to this car and find out exactly just how it drives, I want to bring your attention to some of the styling cues which I'm a huge fan of. So if you look at the front of the car here, you'll see that we've got muscle bulges just going down the centre of the car, and this is carried on all the way across the roof, all the way over to the top to this aggressive rear diffuser here. Now, Ford have never been known to go over and above in the aggressiveness department with their ST models, but I'm a very big fan of this roofline and how it flicks out at the back there. So there's a quick whistle-stop tour of the exterior of the car. As you can see, it's very wet, it's very cold, and it's also very windy. So I'm going to head inside, but before we do, I'm going to let you guys listen to what the 2.3 4-cylinder engine sounds like before we get on the road. On the inside of the Mark IV Focus ST, and I must say this interior is worlds apart and much better than the previous generations of Focus ST. Now, I've got to give credit where credit is due. Ford have completely overhauled the interior of this car, and I'm a very big fan of it. And some of you may say that it is a given, considering the Mark III and the Mark II are a lot older than this car, but Ford have done a really good job of making this feel premium and definitely feel sporty. Just to the right hand side of me here, and also all across the cabin, we've got this carbon fibre style plastic which adorns all the way across the interior. It makes it feel really nice, and also the other materials that are used in here don't have that tacky feel to it. And when you look directly in front of the driver, you've got the digital speedometer, which on the left hand side has your revs, on the right hand side has your speed, and just below that you've got your temperature and also your fuel gauge as well. And just above them fuel gauges, you also have a central screen which is linked to the multimedia unit. Now, you can scroll through all of these different options, but the options which we have on here now are the turbo pressure, the oil pressure, and also the water temperature too. So you can make sure the car's up to temperature before you really go out and give it a thrashing. I mentioned a little bit earlier on that this car does have the heads-up display. As soon as you turn that ignition on, the screen comes all the way up and you can see the speed and also the speed limit of the road that you're currently on. and that just adds to the premium feel of the car. So we are going to be taking this car out now onto the road to find out how exactly it drives, what does the power feel like, how does it handle, and more importantly, will it compete with the i30N and the GTI? But before we do, if you are new here to the Just the Driven YouTube channel, I would really appreciate it if you could subscribe by using the red button just down there. It doesn't cost anything and it helps us massively. And of course, if you did like this video, hit the like button. If you didn't like it, hit the dislike button and share the video with your friends. But without further ado, let's put this car into gear and get straight onto the road. So we're just about to hit the road with the Ford Focus ST, and one of the first things that you will notice is the incredibly notchy and short throw of the gearbox. Now, on the topic of gearboxes, you can get this in an automatic as well, but from my perspective, if you wanted the real driver sensation, go for the manual, because this manual gearbox is absolutely fantastic. Whether you're driving around town or whether you're putting your foot down and really going for it, you can really feel that gearbox working, and it's just got that oh so nice notchy gearbox feel that a lot of manual drivers want. As I mentioned a little bit earlier at the beginning of this video, it is fairly wet, so it's not the greatest day to go out and try and find out how much of a driver's car this car is. But one thing that I must say is that when you get the performance pack, you also get the adaptive suspension. Now, we're currently in sport. It is a little bit harsh, I must admit. When you do go over a bump, it gives you that sort of feeling. But other than that, when you're on a smooth road and smooth tarmac, the suspension is absolutely fine, and you can really feel it hunker down and take every bump that you go across. Now, I know quite a few owners have considered going down to an 18-inch wheel in order to get a better ride. Now, I think it depends on what exactly you're using this car for. If it's going to be a daily car, then yes, I would see the appeal of going down to an 18-inch wheel in order to get a little bit more comfort. But ultimately, if it's going to be a weekend toy and you're going to be driving it for pleasure, then I don't see anything wrong with the 19-inch wheels that are on this car. So I've been very lucky to have this car to drive for a couple of days now, and I have had some better conditions to drive it in. And I must say that once you start putting your foot down, it does get a little bit hectic, regardless of wet or dry. It does feel like the car is pulling a little bit with a little bit of torque steer. It's not too much to the point where it aggravates you, but it is enough to let you know that it is a powerful front-wheel drive car and that it will pull in any direction that it wants to, as opposed to where you want it to go. Now, the car has warmed up a little bit. We're hitting a little bit of a stretch of road here where we may be able to put our foot down, and just for reference, it is a little bit wet. We've got little pops out of the back between the gear changes, and when you change between sport and race, then pops get a little bit more aggressive. They're not there all of the time. It only tends to happen when you are pushing on a little bit, you're using a bit more throttle, and then when you let off, there's only one or two pops there. But it is definitely entertaining. So on the topic of handling, of course, I'm used to the rear-wheel drive handling of the BMW, and although it can be a bit of a handful sometimes, and I think that's a bit of an understatement, this car definitely has it nailed. I don't know if you guys can hear them pops, but it's so entertaining. And I must say, this gearbox is so good. It's really stiff, it's really notchy, and ultimately it just gives you a really good feel when you are changing through the gears. It's not sloppy whatsoever, and I think Ford have put a lot of thought into this gearbox, and it definitely shows. Them pops are brilliant. You know, I've driven this car for 2 days now. I haven't driven it all that much in terms of distance, but the times that I have driven it, I've never got out of it without a smile on my face. It's just got that old school hot hatch feel about it, and I must admit, I do kind of miss it. I do kind of miss of having the drama of a powerful front wheel drive car pulling you along the road, the manual gear changes, and given how good this gearbox is, just slamming it into gear and then powering on. And there's no better feeling from a car that you can now buy for just a smidgen over £20,000. This particular car has 3,000 miles on the clock. It feels new, it looks new, it's got a really good design about the car. The way that it drives is sublime. I was really impressed by it, and I think that the GTI and the i30N definitely have something to worry about. Now, when it comes to aftermarket performance, so DreamScience do an iMap handset. This is a handset that you can plug into your OBD port and flash a new map onto that. Now, the current car has 280 brake horsepower and just a smidgen over 300 pound-foot of torque, but don't quote me on them figures. And when you combine that with the DreamScience iMap handset, that increases it to 330 brake horsepower and 380 pound-foot of torque. Now, that's a lot of power for a front-wheel drive car. and it's enough to put a lot of cars to shame on the UK roads. I just can't get enough of this car. Now when you put the car into sports mode, it enables the throttle blipping. So essentially what that does is it automatically rev matches as soon as you're changing down a gear. Now I discovered this by accident, and I don't know if any other Mark IV owners have noticed this, but it does it before you actually change gear, as if it knows what gear you're going into. So as soon as you disengage, say third, so I'm in third now, if I disengage it and put it towards second, it rev matches, and then you're ready to go. Oh, it's such a handful. It is such a handful, but it is so fun. And I can only imagine that driving this car in the dry and really pushing on is going to be a brilliant experience. But just the whole experience of having the new interior, the digital dash in front of you, the touchscreen in the middle, and it's all quite minimalistic. And I can agree with that. You know, I don't like getting into a car and having a full dashboard of buttons, having a full dashboard of things that you don't really need. At the end of the day, if you're taking a car out to go and drive it and enjoy it, you want to minimise the amount of disruptions that you've got in front of you. Now this car is loaded up to the eyeballs with technology. As I've already mentioned, you've got the heads-up display, you've got lane departure warning, you've got crash collision, you've got electric seats, you've got the touchscreen in the middle, you've got Android Auto, and all of the mod cons which make it a good dailyable car. When you're driving along, even if you move the steering wheels ever so slightly, the car is so pointy, the turning is absolutely fantastic, it's very direct. It doesn't feel jumpy. I know sometimes that when cars have handling that's too sensitive, it can feel a little bit jumpy, especially over rough surfaces. But the way that this car handles is direct, it grips a lot, and considering that we've got the Pilot Sport 4S's and it's very wet outside, I'm surprised at how much grip this car actually has. But as soon as you get into a corner, that's when you feel the LSD grab you back in and pull you around the corner, and it just incites so much confidence in the driver. I mean, I've not driven a front wheel drive car for upwards of a year now, just about that, and I jumped into this car and I felt so confident going around a roundabout now. So this is a wet roundabout, got the throttle on, there's a little bit of understeer, but it is predictable, and you're not exactly going to sit there and swan off into a ditch somewhere, because it drags you in, and then when you get onto the straight, foot down, and it just pulls. The brakes are another thing as well, but if you're pushing on and you want to come to a stop fairly quickly, Ford have got you sorted in that department. The way this car corners, it just goes straight in, straight out, you dart out. It's so good. It's so good. So do I think that the Ford Focus ST will make a good driver's car? Almost definitely. It's so simple to drive. It carries you throughout the corners, it's not going to kill you and put you into a bush backwards, the power's there, the gearbox is absolutely brilliant. Now, as with anything else in the world, there are positives and there are negatives. So let's talk about some of the negatives of this car. So first of all, I mentioned a little bit earlier in this video that I wasn't the biggest fan of the tailpipes. To me, they look unfinished. It just looks like, you know, Dave from the local fabrication shop down the road has just put a bit of 3-inch stainless steel together for you and sent it over to Ford to put it on the back of their cars. Now, some owners have put Audi Q7 exhaust tips onto this car, and although I haven't seen one in the flesh yet, I'm quite confident that it will finish the back end of this car. Now, the second negative for me is also a very big positive, and that doesn't quite make sense, but when you look at these seats, and I'll put a bit of a video on screen now, they look very good, and Ford have always done very well with their Recaro seats. I've always been a fan of what they look like, but as you can probably tell, I'm not the most svelte of human beings, and if you are of the bigger stature, they can be quite invasive on your body parts, if that makes sense. But they are a very nice seat, they are comfortable, and I think if I was to live with this car, I probably wouldn't complain about them all that too much. But because I'm comparing it to the likes of the i30N and the GTI, which don't have as aggressive bolsters, it just doesn't tick that box at this very moment in time. Now, I am actually looking around the car to try and find something else to pick on, but there's not that much. It is genuinely just a very good car, it's a very good driver's car, and I can see that if I had this car for a little bit longer and the weather was a little bit nicer to us, that I would have a hell of a lot of fun with this car, on the B roads and even on a track. So if there's anybody from Ford watching or listening to my videos, if you would be ever so kind to take me out to a track, I don't mind which one, and let me have a hoon of it on a track, then I can give you a bit of a better idea of what the performance capabilities are like. But from what I've experienced, it's very, very positive, and that I can say. I'm still looking around for things to call negative, and I can't come up with anything. The exhaust pipes and the seats may be too bolstered, and that's me picking at straws there. And if you sat there thinking about whether you should purchase one of these cars, I would highly recommend going to take one out for a test drive, because before I drove this car, I wasn't quite sold on it, and it seems to be one of them cars that you look at and you think, I'm not quite sure if I like it, and then you look at it again. I actually like it a little bit more. And by the time you've looked at it 5 or 6 or 7 times, you're a big fan of it. I like the way the car looks, I like the way it performs. It's just an all-round good hot hatch. But when you just put your foot down, a little bit of traction control, all the way up, a couple of pops. And the best thing about this car is, to have a good time in it, you don't need to go flat out 24/7. You can even use 50% of throttle, and because of all the visual experience of the way that the steering feels, the way that the gearbox feels, the sound that you got coming through the cabin, it's just a very, very good time. It's hard to get that balance of having to put your foot down. If you drop down the gears a little bit, that's 5,000 RPM. There's not much more that I can say apart from this is just a really, really well put together car. It's almost as if it's the jack of all trades but the master of none. It's not going to be setting any land speed records, it's not going to be setting any 0 to 60 records, or even 100 to 200 kilometre records or anything like that. But what it will do is it will put a smile on your face. And when it comes to the pleasure of driving, as I've spoken about quite a few times, there's not much more that you can ask for apart from that. Hey up guys, as you can see, I'm currently editing the video which you are watching right now. Now, I got so caught up in the excitement of actually driving and filming with the Focus ST that I actually forgot to record an outro. So I'd like to just say a huge thank you to Ryan, who gave me the availability of his car for a couple of days. Without that, this video wouldn't have been possible, so a big thank you to you. And if there are any other viewers out there that would like me to do a feature on your car, be sure to contact me on the social media below, or you will find an email down in the video description as well. If you did like watching this video, be sure to hit the thumbs up just below, subscribe to the channel so you can keep up to date with all of our ventures, but until the next time, I'll see you then.